Hello, and welcome to The Cine Skinny. It's the film podcast from The Skinny magazine. It's Peter, Ellie, and Jamie this week. Jamie, how are you?
I'm very good, Peter. How are you?
I'm all right. This is the second time we've done this. I think it is actually going back. We should stop just saying to people that this is the second time we've done this, because the second takes are normally quite good, but if we didn't let on that they were second takes, they'd be even better.
Through the magic of editing, the podcast can be whatever we want it to be.
That's very true. They don't know about the 4 hours we've spent in this room already today.
Just how much we hate each other.
So we are back at ehfm.live having another fun day of podcasting. Before we get started today, thanks to everyone who came to the movie screenings that we had on this week. We'll be announcing the next round of those shortly, so keep an eye on socials and the website, etc., etc. On this week's episode, nards, women in saunas, business bastards, things of this nature. A fun time ahead.
I mean, there's always kind of nerds and business bastards on this podcast, basically.
Tag yourself. I'm nerd. Should we just jump straight into it? Anahit is at London Film Festival, so she will be back in 2 weeks' time, presumably with great tell of the city they call London, and presumably we'll have seen some films that she can talk about, or she can just do a 5-minute dive on her time in London. It's up to her.
Yeah, just talk about Pretz. Like they're really into Pret down there.
I know, it's gross, isn't it? What happened to Greg's?
Anyway, let's just get cracking with first film of the week, which is BlackBerry. In 1990s Canada, two of the aforementioned nerds are working on a handheld email device when they run into a shark-like business bastard who sees the potential in their tech. It's time for money, for power, and for mobile telephony. Jay Baruchel and Matt Johnson, who's also the director of the film, play the Research in Motion co-founders, Mike Lazaridis and Doug Freegan. And It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia's Glenn Howerton plays the aforementioned bastard, Jim Balsillie. Jim, if you're listening, I can only apologise. It's Glenn's portrayal of you in the film that has led me to say these things, which are my own opinions. So, Jamie met up with Matt Johnson at Glasgow Film Festival to chat about the making of the film. You can listen to that episode of the podcast on the feed and also on our YouTube channel. And there's also a print version of that interview in the October magazine. So we've really put all of our eggs into this one Canadian basket. But luckily, Jamie, Matt is a good chat and the film is quite good.
Matt is a good chat. He's a good laugh. He seemed to love Scotland, by the way. He was like all over the I've never seen a filmmaker embrace a festival so much. I think he spent the whole time there. I'm not sure if the festival put him up or he just decided, I'm going to just hang around. I mean, talk about Greg's. He enjoyed Greg's. I remember there was a video that JFF put out of him loving Greg's. He talked to me about like deep fried pizza. He was like, yeah, he's a real kind of like embrace Scotland. He may still be here for all I know. He could be like still
He's in this room with us now.
There was a sour point during an interview where he said he really liked Lemmy, which is good, and then he described Lemmy as the Scottish Chris Lilly, which I didn't want to have the heart to break it to him that Lemmy would really hate that comparison. But other than that, top guy.
The thing is, if you get one wrong, then that just proves like it's not a put on.
Yeah.
It's not an act.
Yeah.
Like if you're capable of being flawed,
he doesn't have some like correspondent with an earpiece who's telling him all the hot Scottish references to make so that he wins people over.
Not like us who are totally prepared for this podcast. He's spitting off the top, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I never recommend anything that's bad or get or make the wrong comparisons ever.
I've never got basic details of a metaphor or simile mixed up in my life, and I want that on the record. So a lovely guy who really, as you say, embraced Glasgow Film Festival, and I think had a really good time with the film at Glasgow. Did you see it in Glasgow?
I saw it on a screener before the interview, so I didn't see it in the screening, but supposedly it went down really well. I think it was very much embraced by the Glasgow audience, so that was good.
Good stuff.
Probably why he stuck around, because he thought, my God, these people love me. I'm a god here. They're feeding me Greg's, they're giving me pizza,
They're not pointing out that my references to Lemmy are slightly inaccurate. They're lovely chats. What a great time I'm having in this city we call Glasgow. Ellie, the film itself, what did you think?
Oh, I loved it. I had such a great time with it. I wish I was in that screening because I'm willing about that, people were really vibing with it. It's like, so Glenn Howerton, right? I think that this is really who I want to talk about in regards to this film. He is from Always Sunny. He left Always Sunny at the end of season 12, but immediately came back for season 13. And there was a rumor that the reason that he left was he was worried about getting inseparably bonded to this role, this iconic role of Dennis Reynolds, who's this massive fucking psychopath and like a massive creep. And he's kind of right. Now people can't look at him without thinking that, he's that really creepy guy from Always Sunny. But, he is a Juilliard trained actor. So if he wanted to do like, I don't know, a genuine romantic role, nobody would want to see that. But this role in BlackBerry, It's like everything that's great about Dennis taken to a new level. He's sort of like Malcolm Tucker from The Thick of It. He just has the shortest temper and just chews up the scenery. He dominates the scene. If he's not on screen, it's the thing where if he's not on screen, you're just waiting for him to appear again because he's working so well against like the very like meek Jay Baruchel. And, you know, there's one point where he's like at a payphone and he just tears it in half because he's having an argument with the engineering team on the other half of the phone. And he makes being that angry look like so much fun. And yeah, like that's definitely the highlight of the film. And I think it's probably what people are going to be most interested about it. And interestingly enough, I read that it's getting released on Canadian TV as a 3-part series, which made a lot of sense to me because it's, I mean, a little bit longer than your average like rise and fall biopic film. And it's sort of shot like a TV show. It's got like this short shaky cam and it like that like hard zoom in on everyone whenever we cut to somebody, kind of like The Office or Parks and Rec. So you get the sense that Glenn Howerton is really in his element. It's probably a very similar to vibe to how it is on the set of Always Sunny. But from reading that interview, Jamie, with the director, apparently Glenn Howerton is just a like super serious professional actor who like, you know, gets in, has all these ideas about how to do, never has to, you know, retake a line or anything like that. And I mean, I think that's the thing. He like fully commits to it. He like fully puts so much energy into it, and that inadvertently causes the humor of the film. He's so fun and enjoyable to just watch lose it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you say that it's getting released on as a TV series because I saw an interview with Matt Johnson that is unfortunately not the one that you did, Jimmy. Other interviews are available.
How dare you?
But they're not as good. But yeah, it was an interview he did where he said that they shot a lot of coverage for this film, a lot of long takes and a lot of scenes to the point where the original, if you put everything back together, the film would be about 4.5 hours long. So I wonder whether there's an element of like they have, like Matt Johnson has got enough material to fit basically, and has made a film version that's 2 hours and then put a bunch of extra stuff in. I think the Thick of It comparison's really apt as well because like it does have that kind of pseudo documentary feel. You feel like you're a fly on the wall in these engineering meetings or in these board meetings that are going terribly until they're going well. I think it's really pacey, and also I think crucially, maybe this comes from the way that it was put together and the way that it was edited. And I'm going to leave that in because it's really, really apt to stumble so badly on the word edited. I think it doesn't overplay its hand, that it doesn't try to do too much in a lot of cases, but it doesn't linger too long on things that aren't going to go anywhere.
I mean, I think it's really interesting that you've pointed that out because there's this inherent humility to it, right? It's not like we're going to be talking about entrepreneurial, businessy films later on in the show, but in the grander context of this genre, what we've had before is stuff like The Social Network, which is, you know, everybody uses Facebook and everybody knows Facebook and there is some general interest in its origins, but the film can very successfully say, oh, you know, Jesse Eisenberg is addicted to checking his friend request feed. Like it has that angle, that kind of like, is it that good a thing that this got created? Whereas like BlackBerry goes hard in one of these two directions. It just goes like, no, it's all shit. Like nobody likes BlackBerry and the creator was completely corrupted by his own creation. It opens up this like new avenue for entrepreneurial films, which is completely anti-capitalist. And I think that's the thing is that it would be really, really bleak, right? Like the main character getting trapped in this very Sisyphean ending, and it would probably be a very grim watch if not for the fact that like you just know where they're going with it. Like everyone knows about the BlackBerry and how like it's shit and we don't like it and no one really cared about it that much.
I remember a guy I went to uni with went through, I think by the end it was 16 BlackBerries. He was very into them, but also this guy had mobile phone insurance and is the reason that mobile phone insurance is expensive and difficult to claim on because the guy just kept losing them on nights out or dropping them down. I'm sure he dropped one down a sewer and two down the toilet. Not simultaneously, like it was a consecutive droppings. But this guy, over the time that I knew him at uni, lost double-digit numbers of BlackBerries. I think one of the things about BlackBerry is that in hindsight, and this is one of the things that Matt Johnson's talked about in press, I think possibly with you, Jamie, when you spoke to him, which you can read in the Skinny magazine. He's spoken about the fact that like this was a phone that actually had a lot of problems, but it did work and it did do what it was supposed to do. And it's like people were so eager for a smartphone to come along that they were willing to take something that had a tiny little keyboard on it, could only really do text emails, and would every so often, as they discuss in the film, the email servers would just implode and everyone would lose all their messages.
It has done a really good job of capturing a very specific moment in time and like historicizing. That's not right. Like chronicling something that doesn't get a lot of attention. Even in that one Steve Jobs film, like it doesn't feel like it's a particular moment in the history of technology. It's more wrapped in like Jobs's genius, whereas there's genius happening here, but it's just like clashing with so many different other ideas, like thirst for money and the fact that people actually want this kind of technology, even though it's not necessarily the best thing. So yeah, I mean, I also love the like turbo nerd ethos of it all. This like that these guys are like fucking on Star Trek forums on dial-up modem, and they're playing, you know, LAN party RTSs on their CRT monitors. It's like that very indulgent, liberated nerd thing that like doesn't exist since Disney bought out all the nerdy properties.
Yeah. And I think as well, the other thing of the kind of tragedy of the film is that Jay Baruchel's character, Mike Lazaridis, who is the inventor of the BlackBerry, basically, dedicated so much of his time and energy to something that did work, but was ultimately kind of always doomed in a sense, because once someone had proven that something like this would work, the obvious kind of like life improvements that could be made to a product like this were never going to be able to be made by him, because he was so obsessed with the idea that it had to have a tiny little keyboard. But yeah, it's a really fun film. Performances are good. Jay Baruchel's wigs are bad, but this is a low-budget film, so we'll not stick them too much for that. The score and the soundtrack are both excellent. I think it's got some very good needle drops that are very evocative of particular times in the past, even if, as we were watching, I kept shouting out the wrong year by about 2 years consistently. You know when in your mind you're like, The Strokes, 2001. And it's like, nope, 2003. Well, close enough. And then the White Stripes, I'd be like, now we're in 2007. Okay, cool. Right. So I'm just off by just miscalibrated by a couple of years. But yeah, really good soundtrack, really good score, really fun, well acted. Matt Johnson is great as Doug, the other co-founder, who is the turbo nerd, the turboist of the king of the nerds.
I don't think that there's a shot where he's not wearing a t-shirt with some video game logo on it. Like original Wolfenstein.
He is pulling up to the function in the headband bandana in a full business suit. Ledge.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I like best about the film is it's quite honest about business, actually. It's not, I don't think it's exactly anti-capitalist in a way, because what it says is actually, for these guys to succeed, they needed Jim. You know, like the thing is, those guys were having fun. Like these were nerds who were in their little office, mucking around, playing games, having movie nights, enjoying the hell out of life, but they were never going to be successful. And the reason it is successful is because of Jim and this kind of shark-like reptile who just sees money and like knows how to make money. But the problem is that actually doesn't work either, because his mindset was just, right, if I sell the most of these, we're going to make lots of money. And that works for a time, but actually what makes products good is invention and sort of innovation. And the problem is, once the capitalists took over, it can only get so successful until it implodes, you know, because it's his greed that actually made the BlackBerry bad, because he wanted to grow it so quickly. That's why all the servers failed, because they couldn't keep up with the demand. It's an interesting, you need capitalists to make shit work, but actually, once it's working, get them out of the way, because they will ruin it, you know? It's like, it's actually quite ambivalent about that character, I think, which I think is kind of more honest, actually. But the thing that the film is not honest about is it acts as if these guys are losers. And see, if you look up the net worth of these guys are billionaires. So like the idea that this is like, I mean, it's a rise and fall of this company. You're meant to think, oh, this plucky little company that was good for a couple of years and then sunk. They made a hell of a lot of money. Like the guy Doug is like one of the richest guys in Canada. So
it said there's a little thing at the end where it's like the where are they now, and it's like he's secretly one of the richest men in the world, which obviously isn't a secret anymore because of this film. But like, yeah.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, so the film is trying to paint them as like kind of plucky underdogs who failed, and you know, and we've got to find them adorable. But actually, they made a lot of cash, and you know, I'm sure they're pretty happy.
I think the sort of angle of it really is that you just watch their happiness dissolve. Like they're that beautiful little like, you know, club of turbo nerds at the very beginning who are having all this fun. Like Jay Baruchel sort of turns against them. He gets swept up in the success and starts, you know, screaming at them, and it's like, that's not very How to Train Your Dragon.
Yeah, well, Mike's all about quality as well. Mike's idea is at the start, he wants this to be a quality product. He wants it to be made in Canada with like Canadian engineering, and like they ship it off to Asia where like they can't control the quality. What they're getting is not as good. And yeah, it's like kind of good cautionary tale about, we see it all the time with products that start, like people love them, they're great, they expand too quickly. We could say it about some businesses in Edinburgh perhaps that, not naming any names, but you know, Pierre sweating a bit buckets here as we get.
I mean, the thing is, Jamie, and you know this for a fact.
You're gonna cut
I would cut it anyway. Yeah, and I think that the way that I think you're both right. Classic hosting, because I think it is an anti-capitalist tale in the sense that it shows that so many of the things that you want from life are incompatible with being this kind of big brain business boy. You can't value your friendship with your co-founder of this business over making more phones to make more money, because the business imperative is that you make more phones to make more money. So then you have to, because there's a moment where Glenn Howerton's character says that a thing that he learned in business school is that you have to make sacrifices to succeed, and the bigger the sacrifice, the greater the success, which I would say is that what Sun Tzu or Warren Buffett said, that you horseshit peddler. I think it's quite a truthful look at the fact that actually this idea of like the entrepreneurial zeal of people, actually you need people to keep you in check, and you can't just be a one-man army. That means that you need other people who have other skills than you, and that maybe the best thing you could do is all work together and not let one person go absolutely hog wild with it. And I don't know, sell loads of phones that aren't going to work, or constantly be having movie nights and never doing any work. What if there was some way that we could balance all these things and work together? But that'll never catch on. I've always been told that working together is a fool's errand, and that you should always look out for number one. That's the motto of this 3-person hosted podcast. So BlackBerry is in cinemas across the country from this Friday, 6th of October. It is... Was that a shit?
Foghorn. We're about to get hit by the Titanic.
Oh no, Jim Balsilli's back after he heard what I said 20 minutes ago. Yes, BlackBerry is in cinemas across the country from Friday the 6th of October. It's on at the GFT in Glasgow, it's on at the Cameo in Edinburgh, and at a bunch of other places also. So go and check it out. It's got big 3 thumbs up from us. And from a bunch of business lads doing business to a bunch of women talking shop, as it were. What am I talking about? It's Smoke Sauna Sisterhood. So it's a new documentary by Anna Hintz, which focuses on a group of women sharing stories while taking part in the Estonian tradition of the smoke sauna. It kind of follows them through the seasons and follows their conversations about relationships, family, body image. Jamie, it's one that you said would have been ideal to watch in a cinema because it's a very kind of like warm, intimately shot and intimately put together film. Ellie, I'll come to you first. What did you think of Smoke Sauna Sisterhood?
I did like this film. I think that, yeah, it's got its own atmosphere. It's not necessarily aesthetically anything particularly revolutionary. The film has this sort of like, as a documentary is, it has a lot of establishing shots, but it uses very broad brush strokes of like darkness or steam or snow or bodies. This is mostly what you're going to be looking at throughout the film. They're like telling their stories against this like pitch black background, which makes some of the shots look like Renaissance paintings, which are really, what is it called? Like chiaroscuro or something when the background is...
yes, totally chiaroscuro is the...
Caravaggio style.
Yes, it is the tension between light and dark, where you get extremes of both in the same composition.
Great, I'm glad I pronounced it correctly.
Welcome to Art Hour.
Yeah. welcome to, and thanks for listening to Art Corner with me.
But, well, I mean, way more interesting than what we're seeing on screen is what we're hearing. The stories that are told, the very open dialogues. There's no topic that's sort of like too intense to cover. We go through everything from abortion to abuse to divorce to coming out. It's interesting, I think, that these people telling their stories, they're not filmed from like the shoulders up, they're filmed from the shoulders down. So we just hear their voice and we see their kind of like middle body, and it's like focusing on, their openness, their exposure. But at the same time, it's not that like, it's not that these are just like very general stories that anyone can kind of like put their own identity into. They're quite personal. They tap into stories of like nationhood. There's someone who talks about, the collapse of the Soviet Union and how domestic abuse increased in that time, or like, post World War II austerity and how that made everyone like more on edge, and it really like ate at the safety of women. You know, a lot of cultural talk. There's someone who says that when describing how their family like just show them no intimacy ever, she says, oh, you know, love, Estonians don't really talk about it. So, you know, there's lots to learn from it. It's really, really fascinating to listen to. And the stories themselves, like, they're not sort of very gently introduced into the film. Like, the second that we're there, we're hearing people talk. It kind of starts as it means to go on. They're very heartfelt. They're very thoughtful. They're sometimes incredibly tragic, but sometimes quite funny. So it's just like a very well-made and enjoyable documentary. Quite short, quite simple, but it really platforms the people that it's trying to record.
It does have a kind of soft intensity to it. The frame is often quite full of bodies and steam and sound, and it's just it's really placing these, like you say, kind of semi-anonymized but real personal stories in front of you and letting you kind of see the connections between them and how they all join up. Jamie, what did you think?
Yeah, it's strange to say. I thought it was incredibly beautiful. I thought it was like quite innovative, and it's because it's in some ways a really simple film. We don't really. It's just a bunch of women in the same room talking for like 90 minutes, and it's shot. I mean, it's shot over like I think a year, because it starts off with like somebody chipping away at the kind of ice lake so they can all go for a dip after their sauna, and then at the end, it's like beautiful sunshine and they're swimming in the same lake. So it's incredibly simple in its structure, but in its form, it's really innovative. Like I thought the way it used the camera was really interesting, because actually sometimes you can't even tell what you're seeing at first because the screen is so dark. It's shot inside the saunas, which are quite dark spaces. You know, are you seeing a knee? Are you seeing a breast? Is it a shoulder? And the steam's obviously there as well. So like the form and the bodies kind of just like appear. It's quite abstract actually. Like, you know, it's actually more like Picasso or something. The way you see these kind of like, surreal objects, and I guess that way they avoid the kind of problem of like, you know, the kind of like leering look, like because you're just getting sort of pits of body. The body doesn't become like, you know, a sexual object. It's just like sort of very intimate, kind of bit of an armpit, bit of a knee, you know, and that's it. And I think that's a really interesting way to do it, but it has a strange effect because even though it's this really intimate film where we're hearing the most personal of stories, we actually don't really know any of the women, because there's no kind of, like you say, talking heads, there's no kind of titles coming up introducing people. I don't think we even learn anybody's name.
There's maybe one name.
Yeah,
here,
it's like maybe like somebody whispers a name, but you never, and because the women are all kind of blonde, and you don't really see them in full, you only see like bits of them. It's actually quite hard to discern who's speaking at any one time. Sometimes the person speaking, like you say, is just off screen altogether, so we just see a part of their body, or we maybe see one of the women reacting to the story, and that can actually be very powerful. So it's like this real tension of being incredibly intimate, but actually and very personal, with these incredibly personal stories. But it's also, because we don't know who these people are, it becomes incredibly universal. So really it's a film about just, you know, female, what's the word? It basically, they talk about the whole spectrum of living as a woman in this world, you know, like, so like you say, they talk about they don't really talk about anything that isn't sort of female centric, you know. So they do talk about menstruation, body image, receiving dick pics, like it's like the whole spectrum of stuff, but it's really talking about womanhood. And I think that was quite an interesting choice, and I think that all comes from the form, you know, like the reason it feels so universal. It doesn't actually feel like, you know, there is obviously cultural specific stuff about Estonia, and this is a very cultural specific thing to go to a sauna and talk to each other. It's actually really universal for them. So I think people will probably get a lot out of this going along, because it'll probably speak to a lot of women, especially about, you know, because all the subjects they discuss are incredibly universal, incredibly moving. And yeah, I think it just that choosing that form and that way to film it was actually a really smart move, I think, by the filmmaker.
Yeah, it is a very effective film at making something out of this kind of series of conversations, and being able to, like say, even without usual narrative things that you would require, like knowing who your characters are or having a kind of through plot, it still manages to build out this sisterhood of all of these kind of shared, to one extent or another, experiences that women face in the modern world. Yes.
Yeah. I think the effect they're trying to create is like, you're in the sauna. Like it's very much the kind of fly on the wall idea. And because the way it's shot is very dark, it's very steamy. You know, if you watched it in a dark, warm cinema, I think there would be a kind of feeling, you know, of intimacy, of you are there just overhearing these little conversations. I think that's the kind of feeling it's trying to evoke. And I think it does it really well. It's a really evocative film. You know, you can basically smell like the sweat and the steam. There's a scene where like they make some hams.
They smoke ham.
They smoke some ham in the sauna, and my God, my mouth was watering. I want to eat this ham. It looks so delicious. So yeah, if you know where to get some Estonian smokehouse ham, can you just ship it over? It looks fantastic.
There are some moments that break the sauna experience. They are the dunks in the pool. There's one literal dunk, but then there's things like there's little bits of accordion playing, and there's little scenes of them nipping out to go for a pee while the dog's running around in the forest and stuff.
There's also a like mystic old granny who I think 2 or 3 times like tells a story that's a little more disconnected from everyone else's in a much older voice, and you can like there's ethereal singing in the background, and you can see her face begin to form in the smoke.
Witchy.
They're trying to ascribe like some sort of spirituality to it, but like that's very much what the film I think is trying to do between its content in terms of like what we are hearing from these people's stories and its aesthetic, like trying to immerse you in this sauna, is it's trying to explain to viewers the essential intersection of like the place and the community, like the connection between, you know, being naked and sweating out your grievances and also being able to be completely open and exposed and talk about the terrible things that you've experienced.
One to watch in a dark cinema or a hot bath.
Yes.
The choice is yours.
Or both if you can find a place that does that.
Or a kind of sauna screening.
That seems like the kind of thing that every man would do. Yeah. Bath time screening of
Let's team up with the Arlington Bathhouse and get like a little sauna screening going on. That'd be in the Turkish bath. That'd be really good.
That's one for the notes. That's one for the list of projects that would be cool if they could happen, but might have to be put on the back burner for now. So, Smoke Sauna Sisterhood is on at the Cameo and the GFT from next Friday, the 13th of October. As Jamie said, maybe one to try and catch in the cinema to get the full sauna experience. But if not, when it comes on streaming, hot bath, candle,
laptop.
Not too close to the bath, though. Be careful.
Yeah, the Cine Skinny cannot take responsibility for you dropping
the big leg of ham.
For you dropping your ham or your laptop in the bath. So for this week's chat, we're going to talk about entrepreneurs in film following on from BlackBerry. So big business brains, CEO mindset, getting up at 4 a.m. because you love the grind. These are all, I'm sure we can agree, bad and terrible things that should not be venerated or tolerated. But they do make for interesting cinema and television. So we thought we'd have a chat about entrepreneurs in film, good examples of them being portrayed in cinema, a very American medium, and what's more American than a traveling entrepreneur who loves to be a shitbag to people. So, Jamie, I thought I would come to you first because I came to Ellie with the last bit. What have you got for me?
Well, at first, actually, I was struggling because I realised a lot of my favourite films are about business. I do have a love of that kind of 80s plucky entrepreneur movie. So, like, for example, Working Girl, where Melanie Griffiths is this kind of plucky secretary who becomes the executive, or The Secret of My Success with Michael J. Fox, where he starts in the mailroom and he works his way up, or even I think one of the great teen movies of all time, Risky Business, with Tom Cruise as a high school student who becomes a pimp, basically, and turns his parents' like suburban house into a brothel.
Classic 1980s.
Yeah, yes. But what's interesting is these films, there is kind of some critique of capitalism, but obviously they all come out on top and they all get their like job in business. So you know, this is America, this is Reagan, this is obviously the type of films that are made. But what's interesting, if you actually look beyond these kind of more mainstream films, there was tons of amazing films where the yuppie is the bad guy, and that's a kind of genre in the 80s and as well. So those start to come to me, and I think the first one that comes to mind, I mean, it's not, when I said it was not mainstream, this is totally mainstream, but Paul Reisner as Carter Burke in Alien, you know, so like I think to me is the kind of ultimate sleazy corporate man, you know, like who will basically do anything. He's more like a bootlicker than an entrepreneur. He's the guy who's like, you know, not leading this trip, but overseeing it for the company who's running it. He initially seems like a nice guy, but then he turns out he's trying to like murder everyone and get Ripley pregnant with this alien so he could take it back to Earth. He's a monster, and he gets his just desserts, which I love. But yeah, but then I started thinking of lots of other 80s films like this. So another classic is Miguel Ferreira as Bob Morton in RoboCop. He's like basically the guy who, you know, comes up with the idea of turning dead cops into robots to clean up Detroit.
making him both a cop and a businessman, which is not a double negative, it's just two negatives. Before anyone calls in and is like, is that fine? First of all, how did you get this number? Second of all, fuck off.
Yeah, so that's Paul Verhoeven, who's obviously one of the great kind of satirists and a great anti-capitalist kind of filmmaker. Other ones are just fun. I wouldn't say this is an anti-capitalist film. It's too fun and it enjoys the characters too much. But Glengarry Glen Ross, this kind of like a team of car salesmen basically, and Alec Baldwin makes a cameo and gives one of the great speeches of all time, which is just so fun that you cannot say he's like the bad guy, but he's just like his mentality is insane. For all salespeople out there, like I think they both adore this guy, but really, he's the worst. This isn't an 80s movie, but it's set in the 80s. I think Patrick Bateman from American Psycho is like the perfect. He's not an entrepreneur either, but he's in that world where essentially he doesn't care about anything about making money and murdering people. That's the two things he's into. And I think the kind of like the line between psychopath and entrepreneur is actually paper thin, and I think that's a perfect film for exploring that.
Yeah, I think one common thread through a lot of those is that they all present this idea that like this person would have been all right if they had just stopped there. If you know what I mean. This idea that like with Patrick Bateman, like he's surrounded by these other business assholes, but like he is just too much for the society to like it's this thing of like you can be really, really rich and you can do really, really terrible things. But once you cross the line, that's when everyone has the kind of moral turn to Jesus moment. And it's like, nah, we can't allow that. We allowed that and we allowed that. We were mostly fine with that. But that, come now, let's sort this out. So yeah, I think there's like an interesting thread through a lot of those, particularly like say in the 80s when it was a very kind of like greed is good mentality, that a lot of the films that had business baddies in that, they were doing actions similar to what people would understand as like a kind of typical business or work thing. It's just that they were pushed to the extent where even people who would have previously been on board were like, nah, I draw the line at trying to impregnate a space station pilot with an alien and then using that alien for personal gain. That's my line in the sand and I won't have it. Ellie, another film that you want to talk about is much more about someone whose behavior could be seen and is actually seen as kind of like good and all right by some people. But we're here to say, no, put down that sandwich.
Yeah, earlier on, I mentioned The Social Network and how I think that BlackBerry, which we talked about earlier, is kind of a film that's come about as a natural terminus for some of the ideas in The Social Network. I think that there's a stepping stone between these two films, and I think it's The Founder, which came out in 2016. It's directed by John Lee Hancock, who did The Alamo. He did Saving Mr. Banks with Tom Hanks's Walt Disney. So he's had a very like flattering depiction of some foundational history in modern America. But in this film, which sees milkshake machine salesman Ray Kroc franchise the McDonald's restaurant and eventually oust the founding brothers from the business, it depicts him as this brilliant monster, and it almost might have like been glorifying Kroc's ambition, if not for the fact that he's played by Michael Keaton, who is just a terrifying human being. I don't know how deliberate it is really, but there's a point where he like pitches the plan to the McDonald's brothers, and he just goes like, franchise. Like, he's such a little freak. He gets rejected because the McDonald's brothers, who are John Carroll Lynch and Nick Offerman, they're like humble, good-natured people. But he comes back and they see him out the window standing on the other side of the car park, and he like walks up to the window and just shouts, "You gotta do it for your country." He's already unhinged, but the film is this like steady descent into an even madder performance. He, eventually gets their permission to franchise McDonald's, and then when he finds out that his pals at the country club who are investing as the franchises, they haven't been keeping up the standards of the original restaurant, he like finds this, picks half a burger out of the trash and charges at them across the golf course and like waves it in their face, being like, "Look at that, what is that, lettuce? What the hell's the matter with you?" Like, to me, going back to BlackBerry, like, in BlackBerry, the ridiculousness of it is disarmed by the fact that we all know that the BlackBerry is going to fail and that these horrible characters have their fate sealed. Like, we know that everyone knows the BlackBerry is a tragedy, but McDonald's is everywhere and it's like not going to stop. And it is so successful because people were fucked over. So even though Michael Keaton has this incredible unhinged energy, much like Glenn Howerton in BlackBerry, he could just laugh right back at you because he's like, he got what he wanted. He created the most successful food franchise of all time. And yeah, so like I do think that BlackBerry definitely like looked back on the founder in terms of like how to model the performance of Glenn Howerton in BlackBerry. But the thing about it is like, it's almost unintentionally funny. It's like just cracked, you know? It's very weird. It's very unhinged. And I think it only could have worked because of Michael Keaton.
Jamie, do you have anything else to add?
Well, I was going to say, like, obviously we're talking about cinema here, but I think actually if we were going to talk about the ultimate entrepreneurs who are psychopaths, you got to talk about, you know, the kind of like TikTokers, you know, the kind of the Bitcoin boys who like project this lifestyle of, you know, I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and, you know, I work out for 3 hours and then I read The Art of War for 4 hours and then I work for 20 minutes and use our mugs because I'm a millionaire. There's this kind of whole brand, and they don't realize they are basically a satire. They are basically Patrick Bateman. They are basically Alec Baldwin from Glengarry and Ross, but they've made it into their personality, and it's like those are the terrified people, because those are real. You know, like they think they are entrepreneurs. I don't mean maybe they are millionaires, or I don't know, but they are not to me real
I mean,
people.
it's what we can learn about a lot of these films, right, is that behind many like really successful global brands, there's always like a chance meeting, or, you know, like an unexpected twist of fate that brings an entrepreneur and an artist together. Whereas I think that's something that you can't really admit in the business world, that like it kind of is just luck, because then if you admit that, Harvard Business School kind of becomes useless, doesn't it?
Yeah, because the only thing they could teach you at Harvard Business School how to be a scumbag. But they would say, now what you have to do is wander the streets until you bump into the king from off of Burger King, and he lets you run his restaurant and call it Burger King.
So I think that's why there's some people who so desperately cling to this like how to be an alpha bullshit and like always on the grind, because they can't admit to themselves that you can't just make the right lifestyle choices and eventually you'll be rich.
Acknowledging the problems with that not working would be to acknowledge the problems with the entire capitalist system.
It's like,
they don't do that at Harvard Business School.
There's another big entrepreneur film that came out this year that I didn't see. I saw the trailer and I thought it looked just unbelievably shit. It's Air, about Nike, how they create Air Jordans. It's the amazing story of how Nike created Air Jordans. And I'm like, I don't see any angle for that being interesting. Like we talk about, usually in these films, there's something to suggest that the businessman is like unhinged or whatever. But this film just seems to be about like how fucking cool it was that the biggest shoe company met up with the hottest athlete and they made shoes and everything was awesome forever. Like, it's like Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. They're like action heroes who are meant to be, you know, the heads of Nike or whatever.
And you're right that they're like, and the secret ingredient was money.
Yeah.
We gave Michael Jordan money.
It's like hardly
and now we sell shoes with his silhouette on the side.
It's hardly a, you know, chance meeting, like fated intertwining of like unexpected people.
If they make a prototype of an Air Jordan in the office in an evening, like they do when they have to make a BlackBerry to take to the pitch, and it's just a bunch of other shoes stapled together, then we will take back everything we've just said about Air.
It's just a crock with a baseball card stuck in it.
I don't suppose either you've seen Dumb Money yet, no?
No.
That's the new one. It's maybe just been out a couple of weeks. It's like Paul Dano. It's about the guy who like elevated GameStop, this kind of like out of date shop, and sort of totally inflated its prices by like sort of just bigging it up online, and totally kind of screwed over Wall Street because they were all betting against it. Again, it's like it's exposing this system as just being flawed, and it's full of people who are just chancers, and yeah, like our whole kind of economic system is based on bullshit, really.
I remember when that thing was actually happening, when people like Reddit users were shorting GameStop stock. And like it was this really interesting development because all of a sudden these apps that people are using for stock trading are like banning them and stopping them. So it's just like people are realizing in real time that, you know, the economic world is full of all these like fabricated barriers. And I am interested in that story just because I remember it so well, but I don't know, like I kind of assumed that the film wouldn't be that interesting, because the thing about that story as it was happening is it was like you were just reading things on your phone about people who were on their computers typing things and getting notifications on their app. Like that doesn't sound very cinematic to me.
It's moving number from one place to another.
Like
and then winning.
It's
the film.
Like what happened is conceptually interesting, right? It exposed a lot of flaws with the way that stock is traded and the way that companies treat their traders, but it was all in text. All of it was all digital.
Yeah, I guess like The Big Short must be the similar idea, and it was very successful. I mean, I don't think it's a great film, but like I think people enjoyed it, so it won awards. So.
Speaking of the dumb money GameStop thing, there is a new documentary by Dan Olson, who is a video essayist and documentarian. And he's just put out a new documentary called This Is Financial Advice, which is all about the GameStop thing and about short selling. It goes into, in the first half that I watched yesterday, it goes into so much detail and unpicks the story in a way that, like you were saying, Jamie, proves that it is like a systemic problem, because it talks about the kind of like meme stock people, but it also talks about like how short selling actually works. But then it also talks about how a lot of the people who got in on the kind of let's meme this GameStop stock still have it, because they're like, no, we've proven that the financial system is broken, so we will hold on to our stock until it is worth like $10 million a share. People are talking seriously about the fact that like, I'll never sell this stock, ignoring the fact that like, the way that the system is constructed, you like have to sell it. You have to have lots of liquid. You basically have to have money in order to participate in this thing. And that is why these apps like stopped letting people buy and sell shares, because it was all being done basically on credit. But because it was a short sell, you had to like, you were basically on the hook for whatever the end price of the thing would be. So then the Robinhood like trading app were like, oh, well, you know, we can't just be on the hook for an indefinite amount of money from a bunch of people who've never seen the stock market before 20 minutes ago. I feel like this conversation has gone in a strange direction.
Yeah, I feel like I need a business degree to start talking about this.
I feel like I need to ask someone to pull something up on screen, and I don't want that to be this kind of podcast.
All I know about stocks and shares is from trading places. And I know there's 4 types of stocks. There's frozen orange juice.
Yep.
There's pork bellies.
Yep.
And I forget the other 2 actually.
And then I think there's the NASDAQ and the FTSE. And that's it. And you can trade those 4 things in concert. You can hedge. If you say, I'm going to hedge orange juice against the FTSE 100, that sounds like a thing that someone might say, wearing a suit.
I don't think I hedge the products against the actual stocks, but
what can I say? I'm just a sweet summer child who doesn't engage in the world of business. Quite a lot that we got through there, actually. That went in a bit of a different direction than some of these chats do. But Dumb Money is in cinemas now. Aliens and RoboCop and American Psycho are all on streaming. The Founder, is that on Netflix?
It is on Netflix.
It is on Netflix, so go and give it a watch. And I just wanted to give a shout out to the Amanda Seyfried Disney Plus show, The Dropout.
Oh, yeah.
About Elizabeth Holmes, the blood liar from Theranos, who said that she had a magic machine that could test for every disease under the sun from a single drop of blood. She didn't, and it couldn't. That's the short version of the story, but the long version of the story is quite something. So I'll leave you all with that for the next 2 weeks, when I believe Anna Heat will be back, but I will be on holiday. I'm going to be in Manchester.
Wow.
And then
Exotic.
up north. Doubly exotic.
To some people, Manchester is up north, so it's confusing.
Yeah, everywhere's up north.
I've revealed my location. It's time for me to go. So thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Pierre.
Thanks, Ellie.
Thank you.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, tell people, and then they'll come and listen to it, and they'll enjoy it. You can listen to or read Jamie's interview with Matt Johnson from BlackBerry in various places, our Spotify account, YouTube account, and in the magazine that is out this week. Pick it up. It's got a lovely purple cover. It's delightful. Get us on socials. Give us a shout on email if you want. It's all in the show notes, but we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Bye.
Bye.